Test 2. Speaking. Part 1.
In this first part of the exam, I'd like to ask you some general questions about yourself. What kind of books do you like to read? Which do you prefer to read, e-books or traditional books? Have you read any books written in English? Let's talk about your friends. How often do you meet up with your friends? Have you got a best friend? Which qualities do you value most in your friends?
Test 2. Speaking. Part 2.
I'm going to give you a topic, and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 or 2 minutes. Before you talk, you have 1 minute to think about what you are going to say. You can make some notes if you wish. Here is your topic.
Test 2. Speaking. Part 3.
We've been talking about the subject of letters and communication. I'd like to discuss this subject with you with some more questions. Do you think letters will eventually be completely replaced by electronic mail? Why might a handwritten letter feel more special to the receiver? Are there some situations where we should still try to write letters with pen and paper? Does email make our lives easier? In which ways is the written word more powerful than the spoken word? Do you think technological advances mean we have too much communication now?
Speaking. Model answers. Test 2. Speaking. Part 1.
In this first part of the exam, I'd like to ask you some general questions about yourself. What kind of books do you like to read?
To be honest, I'm not a big reader. I do read, but usually when I've got plenty of time to relax. When I go on holiday, for example. Then I tend to choose something that's popular at the time, something you find on the shelves in the shops.
Which do you prefer to read, e-books or traditional books?
I haven't bought myself an e-reader yet, but I've used my mum's now and again. I can see why they're popular. My mum always says they're great for reading in bed as they're easier to hold.
Have you read any books written in English?
Well, in my English class, we've been reading some English short stories which I've really enjoyed. I think they're made simpler for non-native speakers, but they're still interesting and a great way to learn new vocabulary.
Let's talk about your friends. How often do you meet up with your friends?
There are 2 different groups of people I like to call my friends. Some of the people I study with here in the UK, I see them all the time, of course, and some of us go out in the evening, and my friends back home. When I'm there, we usually meet up at weekends.
Have you got a best friend?
Yes, I have. I've known Miguel for a long time. We went to primary school together, and we've been good friends ever since. We live in the same street as well, so even though we've both left school, we still see each other regularly.
Which qualities do you value most in your friends?
I think the most important thing is that they're honest. If I ask them for advice or for their opinion, I like them to tell me the truth. It's also great if we share some interests so that we can do things together.
Test 2. Speaking. Part 2.
I'm going to give you a topic, and I'd like you to talk about it for 1 or 2 minutes. Before you talk, you have 1 minute to think about what you are going to say. You can make some notes if you wish. Here is your topic.
I don't know if this is the most important letter I've ever received, but it was the first one that entered my head, so I think it must be significant. It was the letter I received from the Education Authority to tell me which school I was going to go to when I was 11 years old. I'd finished junior school earlier that summer, and I'd chosen the secondary school I wanted to go to. It was a good school, and most of my friends had chosen the same place. Obviously, we all wanted to stay together, but there was no guarantee that it would turn out that way. My family and I were on holiday when the letters were sent out, so most of my friends knew which school they were going to before I got home. I remember phoning one of them to find out if they'd heard anything, and she told me that they'd all got into the same school. I had to wait until we got home to find out if I got in too. It was terrible. What made it even worse was that this all happened towards the beginning of the holiday, so I had to wait a whole week until we got back. I can still see the postbox when we arrived home. It was full of letters, and it took a while to find the one we were looking for. My mum opened it. I was too nervous to do it myself. And I remember the big smile she had on her face when she read it. I'd got into the same school as my friends. I was so happy. I think I left my parents to unpack while I went to see my friends to celebrate.
Test 2. Speaking. Part 3.
We've been talking about the subject of letters and communication. I'd like to discuss this subject with you with some more questions. Do you think letters will eventually be completely replaced by electronic mail?
I think they probably will, yes. The only letters I ever receive are official ones. I always communicate with my friends with email or texting. Some of my older relatives occasionally send letters, but I don't think it'll be something my generation will do when we get older.
Why might a handwritten letter feel more special to the receiver?
Well, I suppose a handwritten letter is more personal. An email is just a collection of characters. There's nothing special about it. But each word in a letter is unique, if you know what I mean. The letter has been crafted by someone, and that makes it of more value or gives it more meaning to the receiver.
Are there some situations where we should still try to write letters with pen and paper?
I think it depends. It's a thoughtful thing to do if you're thanking a relative for a present. For example, an elderly relative who might not use email. They'd appreciate a handwritten letter rather than something typed. But apart from that, I don't think so, really.
Does email make our lives easier?
For social purposes, perhaps yes. And because it's so immediate, it's a useful way to communicate at work. Although having said that, Email can also be the cause of stress at work. People expect a reply to an email almost immediately, so if you have lots of emails in your inbox, it can be quite demanding.
In which ways is the written word more powerful than the spoken word?
I think it's because the written word is permanent. Once it's on paper, it kind of exists. The spoken word is gone as soon as it's uttered. Also, we have more time to think about what we write, so that can make it more powerful.
Do you think technological advances mean we have too much communication now?
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. There are so many ways to communicate with people. TV, online newspapers or blogs, email and text messaging. I think we're bombarded with messages now, and a lot of us probably suffer from information overload.